many shots made me do this mistake? When I woke up, everything was gone.
Tammy. I am 29 years old. I have been married to William, who is 31 years old. We have been married for the past 2 years. We had our own little life that we had created for ourselves until one day, I got up and saw that William had emptied the entire house and left. I was devastated and confused, not understanding why he would suddenly leave without any explanation. Our once happy and stable life had turned into a whirlwind of uncertainty and heartbreak. I desperately searched for answers, hoping to find some closure and understanding amidst the chaos. William and I met at work 3 years ago. I was a new intern at the company William was a manager at. Working under William made us spend time together, which led to a lot of physical attraction towards each other. He was handsome, and there was no doubt about it. I could see the way he looked at me and the impact I had on him. As days progressed, we were paired together to work on a lot of projects, which helped us get to know each other on a personal level. After dating for 8 months, we decided to get married and start our life together. William received a better offer from a rival company, which paid him double of what he was earning currently. He took the opportunity, and I continued working at the same place as I was up for a promotion soon. Everything was so perfect, and things were falling into place. We decided to move into a bigger house as we knew that we would be able to afford it. We were excited about the new chapter in our lives and the prospect of having more space for our future family. However, the sudden change in our financial situation brought some challenges as we had to adjust to a higher cost of living. Nonetheless, we remained optimistic and determined to make it work, knowing that our decision was based on the belief that better opportunities awaited us. After 2 months of moving into our new house, I was promoted to a new role. The role was very different from what I was previously doing. There was a lot to learn and required a lot of time to invest in it. There was a lot of pressure, which led to me becoming a stress drinker. I would drink often to relieve my stress after coming home. This soon turned into me getting addicted to drinking. William did raise concerns about it, but I dismissed it, stating that I had it under control, which was so not true. As time went on, my addiction to drinking started to affect not only my physical health, but also my relationships and overall well-being. It became clear that I needed to seek help and address the underlying issues causing me to rely on alcohol as a coping mechanism. Accepting William's concerns and acknowledging the severity of my addiction was a crucial step towards recovery. I took a break from work and cured my alcohol addiction. During my break from work, I enrolled in a rehabilitation program that provided me with the necessary tools and support to overcome my addiction. Through therapy and counseling, I was able to identify the root causes of my reliance on alcohol and develop healthier coping mechanisms. It was a challenging journey, but with the help of professionals and the support of loved ones, I was able to successfully overcome my addiction and regain control of my life. William proposed to me 1 year short in our dating period. I said yes immediately, and we both got married. I could tell that even after seeing my worst phase, William did not run away and stayed by my side. I knew he was a keeper for life. We were now officially married and were having the best time of our life. However, we knew that the wedding and my rehab treatment had cost a dent in our financial progress. We both discussed and agreed that I would start working again. I spoke to my company, who were happy to offer me the same post. I rejoined work after a 6-month break. I had been moved to a new project that was being led by Dave. I had heard about this guy from William, who was not a very big fan of his. William had worked with him and warned me that he was a horrible boss to have, cunning and manipulative. He asked me to be careful around him. Despite William's negative opinion, I decided to keep an open mind and form my own judgment about Dave. I believed that everyone deserves a fair chance, and perhaps William's experience was different from what mine would be. It was the first day when we were introduced to our new project manager. He was in his mid-40s, but was very fit and looked too good for his age. It was nice to see him strategize and come up with ideas on how to go about finishing the project on time. I was pretty impressed by his knowledge and preparation right from day one when he walked in. I could see all the other women in the team drool over him. As the days went by, it became clear that Dave's attractiveness was not just physical. He possessed a charismatic personality that drew people towards him. It was evident in the way he effortlessly motivated the team and created a positive work environment. Despite the initial distractions, I soon realized that his presence was a valuable asset to our project. Dave's ability to motivate the team and create a positive work environment played a crucial role in keeping everyone focused and productive. His charismatic personality not only brought people together, but also helped in resolving conflicts and maintaining a harmonious atmosphere. With his valuable contributions, we would be able to effectively manage our time and complete the project on schedule. Things were getting crazy at work. I had to spend extra hours after my regular shift to compensate for one of the co-workers who decided to take a maternity leave right in the middle of a crisis. I hardly got a chance to meet William and sit with him for a decent conversation. William commented sarcastically that at least I was not drowning myself in alcohol, so he was happy to see me busy with work. I chuckled at William's sarcastic comment and assured him that I was determined to handle the workload professionally. Despite the chaos, I expressed my disappointment about not being able to spend quality time with him, but promised to make it up once things settled down at the office. William told me that as long as I was aware of this, he was happy to see me busy. I kissed and said that I always cared and hoped to spend time with him, which was very true. William smiled and replied, "I know you're dedicated to your job, and I appreciate that. We'll have plenty of time together once things calm down." I felt reassured by his understanding and couldn't wait for the day when we could finally enjoy some uninterrupted quality time together. I thanked him for his support and understanding and assured him that his encouragement meant a lot to me. I promised to prioritize our time together once the work situation improved and expressed my gratitude for his patience during this busy period. I also mentioned that I had been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately and appreciated his patience and understanding. William nodded sympathetically and said, "I understand how important your work is to you, but remember to take care of yourself too. We'll make sure to plan something special once everything settles down." His words made me feel even more grateful for his support and made me look forward to the future even more. It had been such a busy month. I was the only one that was taking up enough responsibilities for completing the project. There were times when Dave would connect with me offline even after work to make sure we were on track so that we finished the project on time. This had led to me bringing work home and being on my phone a lot, even after coming back home, with a load of messages and calls being exchanged between Dave and I at odd hours of the night. I would get up in the middle of the night and start working if I was unable to sleep. Dave told me that I could call him any time of the day or night if I was stuck so that we could work together and complete the assignment. William complained a few times about my odd working hours, even after coming home, but I told him that it was just a phase that would end once the project was completed. He did not like my abrupt calls and messages in the middle of the night to Dave. I told him that it was all work-related, and I had no choice but to keep him aware of the progress I was making. I knew that once everything was settled, I would be giving my entire time and attention to William. I assured William that once the project was completed, I would prioritize our relationship and make more time for him. I explained that my dedication to work was temporary and necessary for the success of the project, and I promised to make it up to him once everything settled down. As I eased into the project, I realized that Dave and I have gotten informal with each other. We would often crack jokes to release the stress that we were under. This had also extended to the calls and messages that we would share with each other. We had a lot of internal jokes that only we understood, and only we would crack up at those references. People started spreading rumors that Dave and I had become quite close lately, especially the women. I could see all the jealousy in their eyes whenever they saw me and Dave talking to each other in a cordial way. It did not take time for the rumors to spread like wildfire and reach William's ears. I reached home one day and saw William pacing up and down waiting for me. I didn't even put my stuff away, and William started shooting his questions. He asked me if there was something going on between Dave and I. I told him it was all the jealous gossip that has been going on, and that there was no truth to any of the rumors. William did not look convinced and said that there could be no smoke without fire, and if everyone could see it, then there could be some truth in it. He started his rampage because he always knew that Dave was trouble. I should have kept my distance from him and how he manipulates people into situations that are favorable to him. I was already tired from work and could not maintain my calm and patience to discuss something that did not even exist. I told William that it was his choice if he wanted to trust his wife, or he could just trust the people that were trying to spread all these false rumors about his wife. I stormed to our bedroom as I did not feel like wasting all of my time on something that was not even important. I was pissed at William for not trusting me over his ex-colleagues. This led to a lot of back and forth between William and I in the coming days. William kept questioning me who I was talking to, who I was texting, and who I was meeting. It didn't feel like it came from a positive and protective space, but more from a detective trying to get answers from a criminal. I told him that it would be better to maintain our distance if this is how he was going to keep behaving. So, as the sulker that he was, William stopped talking to me. He said that if I had respected our relationship, I would try and maintain my distance with Dave. I found it quite ridiculous that William did not understand a very simple fact that Dave was my boss, and there was no way I could do my work without having even minimal interaction with him. The next day, I went to work in a foul mood. I was pissed at William for not trusting me and doubting that I would do something that could hamper our relationship. Dave noticed this and asked me if I was okay, so I gave him a fake smile and resumed my work. After everyone left, Dave and I stayed back to work on a report. He then brought coffee and asked me that he was ready to listen if I had something that I wanted to share. Due to the recent developments in our bond, I started sharing what happened between me and William last night. Dave listened to me patiently and told me that it will all get better once things settle. I felt grateful to Dave for listening to me, and out of nowhere, I hugged him. This was something I could have avoided. Once we separated, there was an unexplainable physical tension which led to us kissing each other. I quickly realized this and pushed him away. It was a weak moment for both of us, and we both rushed out feeling embarrassed with what just happened. The incident created an awkward atmosphere between Dave and me, and we both agreed to give each other some space to process our emotions. We knew that addressing the situation would be necessary in order to maintain our friendship and avoid any further complications. Things remained awkward for a few days between Dave and me. William not talking to me was not helping me either. I felt like there was no one I could talk to regarding what I felt like, which was mostly shitty. All this was eating me up from the inside. I decided to first mend my relationship with William, which was the utmost priority right now. This would help me clear my mind, and if I had a happy marriage, then I could deal with other things. It was almost the middle of December, and we were at the end of completing our project. Things were getting a little easier at work, so I tried to make the first move to fix my relationship with William. I cooked dinner and decorated the table just the way William liked, so that we could reconcile and put our differences away. I knew from the start that William was not a fan of Dave, and that was the reason it was difficult for him to look at things in a practical manner. And to add to it, there were people who were spreading all kinds of rumors about me and Dave. I made William sit with me and told him that he was the only one I ever truly loved. Dave was nothing but my boss, and I had to be in touch with him, as I need to work with him at least till the end of this project. I told him that I would opt for a different team once the project was over, so that he could be at ease. This cleared up the doubts William had regarding my affair with Dave. It was good to have a hearty conversation with William and resolve our issues. I told him that I wanted our bond to be much stronger going into the next year. I felt happy to have fixed my equation with William. We discussed our future plans and agreed to maintain open communication to ensure a smooth transition once the project concludes. I expressed my gratitude for his understanding and reassured him that our personal relationship should remain intact and not be affected, even after I switched teams. It was time for the annual New Year party hosted by our company. Dave suggested inviting William so that he could see for himself, and any doubts he had would be answered. It was a great idea. I told William that my boss had specially asked me to make sure that I come with my husband, as he was really keen on meeting the man I keep talking about all the time. I wanted William to clear all his doubts about me having an affair with anyone at work. I wanted William and me to have fun like old times. He also had his old colleagues and friends from work joining the party, so it was a great opportunity for us to reconnect and reminisce about the good old days. I was excited to introduce William to my boss and colleagues, as I knew they would see how happy we were together and put any rumors or doubts to rest. It was important for me to reassure William of our strong bond and enjoy the evening without any unnecessary worries. I made sure to communicate with William beforehand and assure him that there was no truth to the rumors about me having an affair with anyone at work. I wanted him to feel secure in our relationship and enjoy the evening without any unnecessary worries. Additionally, I knew that introducing William to my boss and colleagues would further strengthen our bond and showcase our happiness together. As the night progressed, drinks started coming in, and I was actually touching alcohol after a long time. The taste of alcohol felt heavenly. I was sure that I could control my drinks and not get into the addiction phase. I was sitting between Dave and William. William kept reminding me about the number of drinks I had gulped down. It was such a buzzkill. It was New Year's, and I wanted to enjoy myself without the nagging in the background. I know he was trying to save me from getting back to my addiction, but at that moment I was so wasted that I had no sense of right or wrong. I just knew that William was kind of killing the mood of the party, so I turned towards Dave and started talking to him. We were both hell drunk and lost all moral senses. I got the flashes from that night when I kissed Dave by accident. We put it behind us and tried to move forward. I don't recollect things after that. It was all blank after we started ordering more shots and started downing them. I got up the next day and saw that most of the stuff was missing. For a while, it was hard to register that it was actually our house. Almost everything was missing, and for a second, I thought that we had been robbed during our sleep. I had a pounding hangover and tried to look for William. I walked through the house and noticed that not only William but also everything except the bed has been missing. I tried calling William, but the phone was switched off. I quickly went and splashed some water on my face and tried to sober up. I saw that there was a note from William that said, "Congratulations for a new year with new beginnings and new people in life." I was left shook. I could not process if this was a prank or was it really happening. My mind raced with confusion and disbelief as I read the note over and over. Thoughts of abandonment flooded my mind, making it hard to distinguish reality from fiction. I desperately searched for any clues or explanations, hoping to find some semblance of understanding in this bewildering situation. My heart sank as I realized that William's note meant he had left me without any warning or explanation. Questions swirled in my mind, wondering why he would choose to start the new year by walking away from our relationship. The weight of uncertainty and sadness settled upon me, leaving me with a deep longing for closure and answers. I tried to sit and recollect what would have caused William to flip in such a way. I remembered that we started drinking shots. Dave and I had a competition on who could outdrink the other. I remember till the 5th shot, and then it was all blank. I contemplated if I should call Dave and ask him about last night. Would he remember what happened that led to my life changing overnight? Maybe I was just overreacting and this was all a prank from William to step into the new year in style. I decided not to panic and wait till the evening to see how things unfold and then try to take some steps. As the day went on, flashes of blurry memories started to resurface, but they were too fragmented to make sense of. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something significant had occurred, and I couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with William. However, I knew that jumping to conclusions without concrete evidence would only add unnecessary stress. I resolved to remain calm and patient until the evening when I could gather more information and formulate a plan moving forward. As I anxiously waited for the evening to arrive, I decided to distract myself by engaging in activities that would help clear my mind. I went for a long walk in the park, hoping that the fresh air and peaceful surroundings would provide some clarity. Despite my efforts, the fragments of memories continued to haunt me, leaving me with a sense of unease. Nonetheless, I reminded myself that rushing into action without a clear understanding of the situation would be counterproductive. So I focused on staying composed. In the evening, I called Dave, asking him if we could meet for a quick chat. I sent him the location of a cafe nearby and asked him to meet me in about 2 hours. I reached the cafe and ordered myself a coffee to sober up a little more, and also in the hope that I would remember something important that could help me track where William was. Dave came in and tried to hug me, which was definitely weird. I gave him an awkward smile and sat from across him. He told me that he loved what happened at the party yesterday and how it was his best formal party ever. It was a wild and crazy night. He also asked me if things were okay between William and I, as William did not look too pleased by the end of the night. That was it. This was the answer I was looking for. I asked him to tell me exactly what happened, as I had no recollection of it. Dave hesitated for a moment, and then began recounting the events of the previous night in vivid detail. According to him, we were at our shots competition, and William was trying to stop me from drinking more. I kept pushing him away and told him that it was a night to enjoy and celebrate. I vaguely remembered this, me screaming that it was supposed to be a night of celebration and new beginnings, as we bid farewell to the old year and welcomed the promises of the new. But little did I know that this New Year's Eve would turn into a night of chaos and heartbreak. As the clock struck midnight and fireworks lit up the sky, my boss and I raised our glasses in a toast. Little did I realize that this innocent act of celebration would lead to a series of events that would turn my world upside down. William had stormed out after an argument with me, and Dave had stayed behind to console me. As he spoke, I desperately tried to piece together the fragments of my memory, hoping to uncover the truth about what had transpired. Dave and I started talking, and I started pouring out my frustration. Dave hugged me to make me feel better, but since we both were drunk, we were out of our senses and started making out. When William came back after cooling himself, he saw the state we were in. He was obviously enraged and pulled me away from Dave. He then forcefully walked me out of the club and waited to get a taxi. Dave said that this is all he saw and he figured probably we went home. I sat there in silence for some time, trying to piece all this together and see if I could remember anything after listening to all of this. Dave asked me if everything was okay between William and I. I lied to him that things were not that bad, and William asked me to figure out what happened, and that was the reason I asked him to meet me to clear my head. Dave looked at me skeptically, sensing that I was holding something back. He encouraged me to open up and assured me that he was there to support me no matter what. Reluctantly, I decided to confide in him about the confusing and troubling situation with William, hoping that sharing my thoughts would bring some clarity to the chaos in my mind. As I poured out my feelings to Dave, he listened attentively, offering words of comfort and understanding. He reassured me that it was normal to feel overwhelmed and that seeking guidance was a sign of strength. Grateful for his support, I began to feel a glimmer of hope that, together with Dave's help, I could navigate through the complexities of my relationship with William. As I reflect back on that fateful night, I can't help but think about how the lines between my personal and professional life became so muddled. It all started with a few innocent drinks at a work-related New Year's Eve party, but it quickly spiraled out of control. My boss and I found ourselves in a state of inebriation, and in that moment, all sense of professional decorum seemed to fade away. So here I am, left with an empty house with just a mattress and nothing else. It has been 2 days with no sign of William or his whereabouts. I am writing this in hopes of getting any advice from anyone who was or is in a similar situation. Could anyone please let me know what I should do in the current situation I am in? Should I file a missing complaint report? Had William voluntarily left to make distance and clear his mind? Or is there something more concerning going on? I'm feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about how to proceed. Any guidance or support would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. Thank you guys for all your comments and advice. From your advice, it was clear that William wanted to make himself distant from me to solve this on his own. So I decided to respect his wishes and give him the space he needed. It had been 3 months since William ghosted me and I had no clue where he was. I tried calling his work, but they said that he was working remotely and had no idea where he was. Feeling frustrated and desperate for answers, I decided to reach out to our mutual friends in hopes of finding any leads on William's whereabouts. However, they too were clueless and hadn't heard from him in months. The mystery surrounding his sudden disappearance only deepened, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease and unanswered questions. I wrote multiple emails to William explaining my side of the story and letting him know that he had got it all wrong. I could only hope that William would read my emails and get back to me, as he had blocked me everywhere else where I could reach him. Also, the mortgage for the house was something I couldn't handle on my own. The bills, the few things that I had to buy since William took away everything had increased my expenses. As I struggled to manage the mounting financial burden, I contemplated seeking professional help or exploring alternative options to alleviate the strain. Additionally, the emotional toll of William's absence weighed heavily on me. as I grappled with feelings of abandonment and uncertainty about our future together. I found myself a good friend in Dave. He partly felt responsible for my life turning out this way. I assured him that it was all alcohol, and that there was no one else apart from me to blame for the situation I was in. Dave listened attentively as I poured out my regrets and mistakes, offering words of comfort and understanding. Despite his reassurances, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any truth to his sense of responsibility. However, Dave's unwavering support reminded me that true friendship means standing by each other through thick and thin, regardless of who is to blame. As we continued to talk, Dave shared his own struggles and mistakes, emphasizing that we all make choices that lead us down different paths. His empathy helped me realize that while he may have influenced some of my decisions, ultimately it was my own actions that determined the outcome. Together, we vowed to support each other in making better choices and creating a brighter future. I was thanking Davey by hugging him for being there for me, and that's when I heard William walk in saying that he knew that I was faking about not having an affair with Dave. He now could see with his own eyes what I was up to in his absence. He said that he came back after reading all the emails that I had sent him, thinking he might have been mistaken about this entire affair thing. Both Dave and I tried to stop William to make him listen and understand what was going on, but he became manic and was in no mood to listen to us. He told us that he had been keeping an eye on us and had seen Dave frequenting the house quite often. He would not be surprised if Dave had a spare key to the house. That was enough to rile me up as well. I told him that I had had enough of him trying to accuse me of something I hadn't done. He could leave this house if I had to keep proving my innocence. He laughed at my behavior and said that I had become a really decent actor, and then left. I fell to the floor with tears rolling down my eyes. I didn't even know that William would turn out to be such a shallow person. Update 2. It had been 6 months since my last argument with William. I thought that after my venting out, William would sit and think about it and come back to me. I was so wrong about him. He had only turned nasty after that. He kept sending me letters stating that he had eyes on me and he knew everything going on between Dave and me. I knew the best thing to do was ignore him, as that would be the most satisfying response to him trying to rile me up. The frequency of his letters reduced with time, and I was happy to finally think that he got the point. I returned from work late in the evening and pulled out the mail. I placed it on the table to check it out for later. As I was going through the bills, there was a mysterious letter, and I could immediately recognize William's handwriting on it. I rushed to open it to see what it could be. It read, "To my loving wife. I am not going to lie, it made my heart race." With all smiles and enthusiasm, I tore open the letter to discover divorce papers in it. My hands trembled as I read the words, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. The shock of the situation left me speechless, my heart sinking with each passing second. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, and sadness, as I tried to process the sudden turn of events. Questions flooded my mind, wondering what had gone wrong in our marriage and why William had chosen this path. The weight of reality settled heavily upon me, and I knew that our lives were about to change drastically. I tried to look for an address on the letter so that I get an idea of where William had disappeared. Maybe if we could just sit and talk, things would turn out differently. All I wanted was to try and save our marriage even after all the nonsense William had taken me through. I never meant for things to unfold this way, but the consequences of New Year's Eve have made me painfully aware of the impact it had on my personal life. My life took a complete 360 with just a small incident of being drunk and kissing my boss. I never knew that William would be a passive-aggressive sulker who would just abandon me without a word or asking for an explanation. Now, I find myself grappling with the aftermath of that fateful night, desperately trying to salvage my marriage and understand why William reacted in such a drastic manner. It's disheartening to realize how one seemingly innocent mistake can unravel the foundation of trust we had built over years. It's a sobering reminder that we must remain vigilant in protecting the sanctity of our relationships and the boundaries between work and home. It's a hard truth to face, but the events of that night made me realize that I need to set clear boundaries between my professional and personal life. The mixing of alcohol, work, and personal relationships led to a devastating outcome that I never anticipated. I have learned the hard way that the blurring of these boundaries can have serious consequences for my well-being and my relationships. I am determined to make changes and prioritize the well-being of myself. This experience has been a wake-up call, reminding me to create a healthier balance between my professional and personal life. I decided that I would not let William or any other man put me down ever in life. I did make a few mistakes, but that did not mean that I was a bad person or that I cheated on my husband. I did kiss my boss when I was vulnerable, but if William would have just spoken to me about it, tried to understand what I was going through, maybe all this would not have happened. I am not here to blame anyone for how my life turned out. This is just me venting out and setting this post as a reminder that you never know what and how a person can turn their back on you. To all the women out there, if the man you are with does not give 2 cents about what you are feeling, then I would advise you to put on your sneakers and run. The relationship is not worth it. He would never try to get into your shoes and understand your perspective of why you did what you did. I am not here putting down all the men out there. It is just one of the biggest red flags that you need to look out for, in my opinion. I am still hopeful and positive to lead a happy and wonderful life without being dependent on anyone else for my own happiness. This is the lesson I am going to take away from this roller coaster of a year.
Redditors, thank you for listening. My name is Queeneth, and I am, at least I was, married with 3 beautiful children who I somehow lost custody of. Well, 2 of them. I've lost custody of 2 of them, but I'll live. I want to talk about my mistake, and I sincerely hope you will listen and learn from it too. Please try not to judge me too much for what I'll confess to here. Thank you. So Darren and I had met in my final years of college, and he was attracted to me. I was attracted to him too, but I was somewhat of the shy type that knew how to hide their expressions almost very well. He had tried to flirt with me. He used the word court when he approached me again after our initial meeting, but I hadn't given him a positive answer. Darren had already graduated, I found out later, but he had been in school at the time for his certificate and some clearance to close up his school file at his faculty, and we had met. He sort of followed me around. I did not mind though, and he had been the sweetest man I had ever met in all my 4 years at college, and he was polite to his elders too, so I had sort of agreed, though denying that I had fallen for him too. I told him let's give it a try to see how far it goes, and he quickly accepted it, though I had not really been sure about it. As I said, I wanted to see how far it would go, how serious he was. Darren and I had met again after 3 years of being separated after I graduated. Darren had to travel abroad for work, and he had been transferred back to the country after 3 years of working with them. He was excited to see me since we had only been exchanging calls and texts. I personally thought that he wasn't interested anymore, so I had moved on. But after seeing how sincere he had been, how dedicated he was to getting our relationship to work again, to build back again, I decided to cut off my old partner, Gregory, if you count the 2 years we had spent together, and how I was leaving him for another man and focus on Darren properly. Darren had said he wanted to settle down with me, so why not? I would be getting a sure companion out of it. Of course, I told Darren that I would have to get over my old relationship first, like setting everything on a clean slate again first before I could give him my full 100%. Now the man I had been with before Darren returned, Gregory, was not the type to be let go. He had the mentality that he should always be the one doing the letting go, and not the other way around. Meaning that it wasn't over till he said it was, but for some reason, he had not made a move, and he had texted me saying that it was okay if I wanted to settle down with someone who was ready for me, since he himself had not been ready at the time, so I thought nothing of it, and I thanked him. That had been the beginning of a dangerous game, and the turn of events that followed a few years into my marriage. I didn't know it would lead to some life-threatening experiences. The wedding was a blissful experience. I cried tears of joy, and my parents, by that I mean my father because I lost my mother when I was younger. I was so happy on that day, and he cried as well as he told Darren to handle me with care, and I tearfully told him I was a big girl and I could take care of myself. Everyone around us laughed, and we continued the wedding. After we said our vows and went through with the wedding reception, Darren and I went for our honeymoon, and I felt bliss like nothing else could compare to. I had found happiness, or so I thought. Darren had flown us out of the country for our honeymoon, which was full of lavish dinners and relaxing beaches for a whole month, and the nights had been full of passionate lovemaking. It wasn't my first time in a man's arms, but Darren made me feel like it had been my first time in bed with a man. I was so amazed at how amazing he was in bed, and I childishly wished for the honeymoon to never end. and that it should not end too soon, but I had to get back to work soon, so we had to cut our enjoyment short and return home in time so we'd start work. After our honeymoon, Darren and I returned to the country and we moved to a quiet neighborhood with a nice little white fence around the properties. It was the neighborhood of my dreams, as weird as that sounds, with friendly people, and the house had a big yard at the back and a decent driveway for both our cars. I couldn't contain my joy. I couldn't be happier. We were together for around a year before we decided that it was time to try for a child. Darren decided that we'd wait for at least a year after the wedding before we would try to have babies, because we would need to prepare more than just a house for the children. We also needed to stabilize ourselves mentally some more before we would bring children into the world, and I had wholeheartedly agreed. I also needed time to prepare, since carrying a pregnancy to full term was going to be stressful both physically and emotionally, and a year later I got pregnant. I was 22 by then. I was so excited, and I told my father, who was eagerly waiting for his grandchild or children, if the pregnancy happened to be for twins. When Melody was born, the celebrations that followed us so much, and the level of excitement around her birth led to her name, Melody, because we were happy, and we had essentially been singing for joy. Melody was around 2 years old or so when I started to get strange spam calls and text messages. I mean, calls and texts from unknown or foreign numbers, and the messages had usually been cryptic, one word or one sentence in total, so it irritated me initially, much like the spam calls that would get disconnected as soon as I answered, and the number would become unreachable when I would try to call them back. One of the spam texts had simply read Queeneth, and I had been puzzled, but I had considered it to be scams of some sort and let it be. The messages were becoming confusing, saying things like, "They'll find me and they miss me," whoever it was, and somehow my mind provided me with an imposing, arousing image of Gregory, and after so many years since our relationship ended. I shivered because I had a feeling like a mix between shame for thinking like that and arousal because the view in my head was mouth-watering. But I shook it all off as I had remembered that the last I heard of Gregory, he had left the country. He was a CEO of some company. There was no way I could get a taste, no matter how attractively my mind painted him. There was also definitely no way he could be the one doing anything. I changed all my contact details, social security number changed and updated, after many tedious months and processes, after my marriage, to properly sever mine and Gregory's relationship permanently. For good. Yet I felt like I was telling myself lies. I had no idea why, but I felt a shiver of excitement run down my spine at the thought of being chased again, being obsessed over and stalked. Call me a glutton for punishment, but it had felt quite exciting. After the strange texts and calls had come the mails, like actual letters in the mailbox. I was even more puzzled by this. I tried to trace the sender, but even the company could do nothing to track the sender and addresses. Actually, there were no addresses. Like a ghost was responsible for slipping a letter in my house mailbox. Either that or the person had put the letter there by themselves. I'd started to enjoy the game of hide and seek, though I would definitely deny it if I was asked. I received an anonymous mail saying, "I'll come for you soon," one Wednesday evening, along with a small bottle of very expensive perfume, a few years after I had birthed my first child, my daughter Melody. She was 4 years old then. There had been no sender or address of any kind on the envelope again, after such a long time without those scary emails. I checked the mailbox over and over again to find a clue or anything like that, but the ecstatic shock running up my spine was obvious, and I was getting more curious. I remember that I went out with friends, a bridal shower. I think, well, the clothes in my suitcase had given that away, but I had left earlier and the rest of my memory was a blur, bored out of my mind and irritated until I bumped into a familiar face. Gregory was back in the country and he looked as delectable as ever, as always. We talked over drinks, heading over to a bar near the hotel Gregory was staying for the duration of his return, and we somehow caught up on how each other's lives had been going all this while. I had a faint feeling that it was Gregory that was sending those letters. He liked to play games like that, liked the intrigue that somehow got me going more than usual. Gregory eyed the ring on my finger, making a comment about the stone in the middle of the silver ring, claiming that he could have done better, and I giggled like a teenager, and he responded with that predatory smirk of his. I told him that I had ended things with him because he was not ready to commit to a lifelong relationship, and his expression changed slightly from my words. Yeah, he claimed once again, like he had when we were dating all those years ago, that he was never ready to let me go. I asked him if it would still be the same now that I was married with a child, and he laughed at me. Gregory told me that I was special and would remain special in his eyes no matter what, for a very long time. I told him that no one really got me the way he did, and his expression changed again, but this time, he smiled and reached for my hand on the bar. He made a motion to move upstairs, and I smiled warmly at him, nodding. I stood up and followed him out of the bar to the hotel. I had driven my car to the hotel parking lot while he went up and got room service, and I waited for him. When we got to the room, Gregory had commented that he could smell his gift on me and complimented me, saying that it suited me. Things went so fast, and just like that, I slept with him. It had been a fantastic night, and I had never been held that intensely for years. I hated to admit that Gregory was the only man who could take care of me so well in bed, knew how to touch me right and make me feel like I was in cloud nine almost all night to leave me a breathless, paining mess. By the time it was morning, Gregory had ordered room service and we had breakfast in bed, showered together, and went through another steamy round that left the glass foggy, and I was carried back to the room. We somehow rekindled our relationship again. We had agreed to meet again and talk over a nice meal, and I went home happy and excited, but I had gone home to an empty house. My husband was on a trip with my children to my dad, so I texted Gregory. We texted almost all day, and did I find myself falling? Yes, I was falling after a night of passion and a bit of obsessive chasing and flirting. I had been secretly going out with Gregory. We were meeting at almost every month end and on some weekends for dates that most often ended in passionate nights and left me with jello for legs. Gregory spoiled me with gifts, exotic things. There was also the sort of attention and service that I had never experienced with or gotten from Darren, so I continued the relationship and everything was smooth sailing and rosy, till I had somehow become careless. A bit careless. So what led to your husband deciding on a paternity test, you might have wondered? My husband would never think like that, never have such an idea, because after all, I was the perfect partner, the perfect wife. He must have seen a letter that hinted at a paternity test. That must have been it. I thought back to the turn of events. I had been receiving strange letters in the mail for almost 3 months after Adam, my third child, was born, and each letter roughly had the same near-vague message. One of them had simply said something about a son, and I quickly discarded it, burning it up in the backyard grill stand, and I had made my husband worried, but I told him to think nothing of it. I was certain that it was not Gregory this time. It had to be someone else, because Gregory had no reason to write such letters since we now had something again. Something quite nice. I was fairly certain that my husband had been the recipient of one of the strange letters that had been slowly eating away at my mentality and filling me with anxiety. It had to be. And something just had to confirm this. Now my husband watched me panic almost every day at the sight of strange letters, and he watched me set them ablaze with a frightened look on my face each time, shaking hands and with a face as pale as a ghost's when I would come back in. He began to notice how shaky I was as of late, and it had made him suspicious to the point where he had begun to intercept my letters. Later, I figured, someone has definitely been monitoring me. I came back from work one faithful day when I saw him through our bedroom window walking towards the grill and setting pieces of paper ablaze. Some very familiar pieces of papers. You see, the sender of the letters, my new dreadful stalker, had always used one particular type of paper to always write the letters sent, and I had memorized it at that point. My heart skipped a beat when I saw them in my husband's hands. Darren had seen them before I could get them, and since it was more than one letter, it was obvious that Darren had taken a few from the mail before I could get to them. I sighed, coming to the realization that it was not just a break in the sending of the letters, but rather a change in the recipient, a change in who opened the mailbox first. Now, some of the letters were still as cryptic as usual, but some tended to be quite specific or descriptive. One time I received a letter with my second son's day, month, year, and time of birth and the date of conception, which clashed with what my memory provided me with and made my son's, Stephen's, date of birth make some sense. It made too much sense and had bluntly pointed to my newly kindled affair with Gregory. Someone had a hand in something they should not. My husband and I began to sort of drift apart after the letters, and I tried to play it off, play dumb and act oblivious to it. I hoped that if I acted normal, my husband would let it go and drop whatever it was that was keeping him on edge, but it only worked for so long before he started to get restless and started to look for clues and answers. And no, my husband was not following me around or anything like that. My husband had taken a more clinical approach to everything. My husband went to the ministry to check my former social security number before I had changed my name and sort of adjusted my identity cards. He had found a way to access my previous social media accounts, and he thoroughly investigated my past to track the strange letters properly. Something I had been too terrified to do because I did not want the details of my relationship with my former lover to be in the open. I was told later on that Gregory and Darren met and spoke about me and about my past relationship with Gregory. But when Darren returned home, he had a blank look on his face, and he did not speak to me at all that night and almost all through the next day. We finally spoke to each other after almost 48 hours of silence and thick tension. Well, not really speaking. Darren came to me with questions. Darren asked me if I broke off my relationship with Gregory properly. He confronted me barely an hour after we had tucked the children in for the night. I was taken aback. I blinked rapidly as I took in his question, and my previous encounter with Gregory after I had Melody flashed right before my eyes. I didn't notice quickly that I was shaking, but Darren had, and he had let out a sigh. Fear washed over me at the thought of my husband catching on to my secret, but I tried to play it cool. Darren clarified that he had no intention of scaring me, and I struggled to get my breath under control, formulating my excuses and lies. I told Darren that he had said he would let me go so I could get married. I breathed out and I watched a frown form onto Darren's face. The gears in his head had been turning. Darren said that as long as the relationship with Gregory ended, then he was all right with it. His expression had still not changed despite the change in tone, not angry anymore, but tired and hurt now. Darren asked if I had slept with him again after we got married. My heart sank, but I shook my head a bit before answering. Something didn't feel right. I stuttered, getting tongue-tied, and Darren's face hardened even more at my words. I tried again, bluntly lied to his face that I had not, and Darren just raised a brow. He went on to ask about the letters, the ones about a child. I told him that I didn't understand them myself. More lies. I confessed to being more terrified than curious, and Darren had nodded at this. He had his arms crossed over his chest as he asked if I was sure that I wasn't cheating on him, and I looked him in the face this time as I answered. I had contacted Gregory previously, who had told me to calm down and assured me that he would do something to ensure that we would not get caught. I answered, lied to Darren's face that I had not, and silently prayed for it to end there, for the entire matter to die down, but my prayers had not been answered. He spoke so calmly and said we should do a DNA test. He said it was the only way to prove my innocence. I was scared, but I assumed he'll forget about it soon, so I just told him that we could do it, so he'd stop doubting me. There was a heavy weight on my chest, especially at the thought of something that I hadn't told my husband about for some time yet, and I had not yet worked up the nerve to reveal to him yet. I considered spilling the beans, but I thought better of it, opting for something else. I tried to act soothing and calming, telling him that we were tired and that it would be better to rest and talk about it at a later date, and it seemed to be working as his shoulders had relaxed and he breathed in and out gently before he had come close to hold my hand and led me to the bed. He held me through the night, and when morning came, we went about our days and businesses as usual. I lied. I had wanted him to forget about it, forget about everything, while I had tried to call Gregory again, even after he had promised to help me not get caught. On the D-Day, my husband came to pick me up from the office as I had gone to work without my car, and he came with the children. I was so confident, ready to go along with his request because I was so convinced that all of the children had been with Darren, except Adam, that is. But I did not want to think about it that way. I planned to find my way out of everything after the test confirmed that 2 of the children were Darren's. Even my first few times with Gregory would not be able to influence the DNA test results in any way, since we had played safe despite not using protection frequently for a while, or so I thought. I was convinced and I was cautious. The only time we really played without protection, and I had gotten protection, was because we mutually agreed to sort of have a child and seal the deal properly before we broke things off. Darren gave me a look as I slid into the passenger seat, a very disgusted look that I returned with an equivalent of my own look of disgust towards him, and the kids looked at us questioningly. My youngest, Adam, had spoken up, and his older siblings turned their attention towards us as well, since I and Darren were not talking. I smiled and reached back to ruffle his curly hair and tell him that it was fine. I assured him, and all 3 of them had relaxed at my words, relaxing in their seats as my husband pulled out of the driveway and we began our trip to the local hospital. We arrived and we were directed to the doctor's office, from which we headed to the laboratory where blood was drawn from Darren and the children, and then we were taken back to the laboratory waiting room to wait for the test results. The first test results showed that only 1 child had a 91% match rate with the DNA of my husband, so we will have to run the tests again. The doctor was reading through the slips of papers that had come out from the laboratory, and the look my husband gave me was nothing short of a chilling glare that made me scared. I was scared and confused by this. I was pretty sure I had conceived at least 2 children with Darren, and there was no way the paternity test would have had such results unless that wasn't so. It had to be a mistake. I consoled myself as I sat there with my husband and children and waited for them to run the second test. The second test had slightly different results this time. This time, there had been a 97% match in genetic material of the father, Darren, and one of the children. The doctor had the decency to look at me apologetically, and my husband frowned harder. I asked the doctor to run the tests again. I did not believe in the results. I was barely able to hide the panic in my voice as I spoke to the doctor, and I looked pleadingly at my husband, who had only let out a tired sigh and nodded his assent, and the doctor went back to the lab again to run a third test, and I prayed silently to every deity that existed on the face of the earth that the second result had just been some sort of glitch, but I was sorely disappointed by the next slip that had been handed over to us. It was another 97% of a match with my husband's DNA, but for only one of the children. With that third test, the verdict had been finalized and read. One of the children, only our first daughter, had been his, and the other two belonged to another man or other men, and I had to explain it to him. And fast, too, before I lost a tooth or ended up with a broken rib or broken something. I cursed under my breath as the car ride back home was silent. Gregory wasn't with me, and I had to deal with this myself. Gregory had disappointed me, and now I had to face the music. Darren looked menacing as he crowded me in a corner of our bedroom. His voice had been deathly calm as he spoke to me. He told me to confess, and there was cold sweat running down my spine. It was clear that I was scared. I apologized and told him in tears to back away a bit. Told him I was beginning to panic and start hyperventilating, but he only looked at me, telling me to confess or choose to either faint from my panic attack. I cried and wailed. I was glad that our room was sort of soundproof because I knew that the kids would not have heard even if they were home at that moment. They were at my in-laws' place, that was closer, since Darren said we had to talk. It was from the time we left the hospital that he took a turn and took us to his parents' house. My mother-in-law was ecstatic to see us, but we told her that we had not come to make our usual periodic visits. Darren lied to his mother, saying that he and I had clashing business trips outside of town, so we had come to drop off the children for the night. Since we usually went to their place for visits, the children already had few clothes there. My mother-in-law had said that the children could stay even long after we both got back from our trips, so we could have some romantic nights without restraints when we got back. I felt so guilty then. So going back to when we were in the room, I was terrified, had stumbled over my words as I began to narrate how I had been monitored after I birthed our first child, and I had woken up in a hotel right before we conceived our second child. I broke down and confessed. I admitted to having sex with my former lover, Gregory, but I quickly added that I didn't know that it was a fertile day, so it was a slim chance. I further explained that I had gone to a hotel room again after I went to visit my father one time, and it was to see my ex who had just returned to the country and had been the one responsible for the first strange letters. He had asked me to come and see him. I have the excuse that I had somehow fallen into bed with him again, and Darren looked disgusted. I saw the look on his face as I blurted out that I did not know what had possessed me to start up an affair with the man and that I was sorry. Darren had called me a heartless, cheating woman, and he yelled that I should have at least gone for a medical checkup after all of that, or that I should have just gotten rid of the child initially. He was shouting, and I found myself shrinking back in fear. He revealed that he suspected that Adam was not his, given the time frame of the boy's birth, that Darren had somehow calculated himself, and that someone had tipped me off about my movements through the time frames of my two last pregnancies, and tracking my phone had further confirmed it. I blinked at this and I was shocked. I kept confessing to sleeping with Gregory and apologizing. Darren yelled again, asking how long, and I flinched and let out a pained sound, a whimper, and shut my eyes tightly. I confessed to having started an affair with Gregory the year Stephen had been born. A whopping 10 years of playing hide-and-seek with a man I had sworn was now a forgotten chapter of my life. It had hit Darren differently, hurt him differently. Darren was speechless before his hand had come sailing through the air and cracked right on my cheek. The impact caused me to injure the inside of my mouth, and I started to bleed in my mouth. My eyes were wide open, and then I just stood there dazed because Darren had never hit me before. I was on my knees now, begging and apologizing. I don't know when I closed my eyes and drifted with my face swollen with tears. I woke up in mine and Darren's shared bedroom, all tucked in under the soft covers rather than the duvet, and the air conditioning was blasting cold air from a corner in the room. There was a tiny bandage on the corner of my mouth. I turned to look around and spotted 2 ibuprofen pills in a saucer on the bedside table with a glass of chilled water. My heart skipped a bit at the actions that were undoubtedly taken by my husband, and cold dread had washed over me as I remembered the metaphor of the calm before the storm. My heart sank further when I found the document right beside me on the bed, on the other pillow. My hands began to shake as I imagined the worst. I was ready for it, but it didn't change the way my gut clenched and twisted as I pulled out the contents of the brown envelope. Darren had already signed his part of the document, and all that was left were my signature and our respective thumbprints, which will be done in court. The document stated that Darren would have custody of our first daughter, while I'd keep the 2 boys and some of Darren's assets and money to help me. I felt like he only added the last statement out of pity, and I didn't deserve it. But when my mind went to raising 2 kids alone, I had decided to suck it up and keep my mouth shut. I quickly signed, although I wished I could just rip the papers apart and set myself in the house ablaze, so I could let go and be free from the guilt and shame in my mind and soul. Darren appeared at the door, asked me if I had signed the papers, as I was thinking of tearing up the papers. He had a hardened expression on his face as he looked down his nose at my pitiful self on the bed, and he let out a tired sigh as he extended his hands towards me. He asked for the papers, and I handed over the papers and the envelope over to him. Darren took a seat at the foot of the bed and told me that he didn't hate me. He asked if I knew that. Then he had gone further to say that he could not bear the fact that I had lied to him and had hidden the truth from him, and had also had children with other men. He stated once again that he knew Adam was not his, and that he had been waiting for me to confess, but I had only become depressed and sad, so he had let it be, but now it was not just one child that wasn't his. Darren said that he wanted me out of the house and that I could go get my sons from his parents. He also said we would see each other in court. He said this with finality and turned to leave, slamming the door shut behind him, and I cried out. I decided not to stay in the house anymore. I left 3 days after signing the divorce papers and headed back to my dad's house. My father hadn't asked me questions, but he was able to tell from my expressions that something was terribly wrong. I kept everything from my father until it was time to go to court and dissolve the marriage properly. I had to tell him eventually. It didn't even make anything easier, delaying like that. I had been a sobbing mess afterwards, and at dawn, it had been time to face my husband again, for the last time, our last day as husband and wife. Update. So I lost custody, which was expectedly since it was a case like mine. I was granted custody of just one child, the one that didn't belong to Darren, and the other 2 who happened to share genetic similarities with Darren were with him. I regret my actions, but it's not like I can change them, so I have to live with them. I cried bitterly when my youngest child and middle child, Adam and Stephen respectively, asked why they couldn't be with their siblings anymore, and I had no idea what to tell the innocent boys. I couldn't tell them that Darren was not their father and that Melody wasn't their biological sibling. God forbid that, so I played it off by promising them that they could still visit, which by law was allowed. But I promised Darren that he would never have to set his eyes on Adam and Stephen in his house again, since Adam and Stephen weren't his real sons. I still think about Darren hitting my face. He never apologized for it, and I didn't expect him to. It might not have been so bad if I hadn't tried so desperately to hide it from my husband rather than just telling him that someone had been targeting me. I regret it, deeply. But I can't really go back to the past and change anything. I also never found out who sent those other letters about Adam. It might have been Gregory or maybe my husband, and he was just pretending, but I guess I'll never know. Not that it matters now. Gregory and I called it quits eventually. Well, I called it quits, and somehow, he had been in a hurry to end things. Like he had eaten his fill of me and I was no longer useful to him. Though he agreed to shoulder some responsibility for the children, but it would be anonymous. He threatened me to make sure I never contacted him again. I don't know how a person can just change like that. So I lost even the man I had expected to stay with me after everything. If I could go back in time, I'd have never gone out with Gregory in the first place, but I can't really change the past, now can I? I only hope that anyone reading this will learn from me to be honest and to be careful too.